Welcome back. As we all know, HS2 has had its fair share of critics, none more so than the residents of Camden Town, who feel their borough has been particularly hard hit. Having banded together to join Stop HS2, residents have shown real solidarity against fast rail. We're delighted to be joined by three of those such residents from Camden Town today. John Neve, Primavera Bowman and Dan Llewellyn-Hall, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show. What brings you, of course, all together? You're all residents of the borough of Camden. Perhaps, John, you can tell us what that means for you all in terms of HS2.
Yes, well, as you say, we're all residents of Camden. We live in the area which is around Euston Station and just to the north of the station. And as you know, the new high-speed line is on its way into Euston from the north. So we're in the firing line, as it were. And where we live is about to become the biggest construction site in Europe. So to give you an idea of what we face, we've been told by HS2 that in order to develop the line, they're going to have to remove 3.5 million tonnes of spoil. And that will mean hundreds of thousands of HGVs, heavy goods vehicles, coming in to and out of Camden over a 15-year period, because the whole project is going to run through till 2033.
Dan Llewellyn-Hall, where is the development now? I mean, has it started? Is the preparation works happening? What's been the impact so far?
Well, and you can see from one flank of Euston Park in particular, where the work has visibly commenced, is that the park has been cleared up. It's boarding all around it. It's all made to look as though it's all very friendly and green, and in fact, what it's doing is quite contrary to that. It's creating havoc really in that environment on the busiest road, the most polluted road probably in Europe. And we have this great little green sanctuary outside the station, which is just slightly inconveniently in the way, and they're going to remove a 300-year-old park for the sake of that.
And of course, Dan, you're an artist. Most of us going to say recently, but 2013-14 was the last portrait painted of Her Majesty the Queen. You, of course, have expressed your opposition through art and have painted various canvases in relation to the tree felling that will result, or has resulted, due to HS2. How's that been received?
Well, it's one other way, I think, of first of all bringing a group of people together who are somewhat fractured by this whole event, and it creates a certain amount of positivity, but also brings focus onto the park and creates a visibility for it, particularly when you're making drawings and paintings. So we've had numerous schools that took part in a couple of days that we had on the park itself, where this work is all starting, and an exhibition just across the road. So it's all very much a big community effort. We had Sir Keir Starmer even came and had a look, and we're hopeful he's going to make the right words to progress things in the right direction. But particularly for my interest in this group, which we're working with as an arts activity, is really to draw attention to this green little oasis that we would like saved. And we appreciate, we can see now that the HS2 is well and truly underway. It's happening up and down the country. We're not as stupid to think that the whole process is going to grind to a halt, but we'd like to see a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of tolerance in the way that HS2 deal with the community, and not have this proxy sort of consultation.
And Primavera, you're moving on from sort of the environmental to the environmental aspect. You're concerned about effect on ecosystem, plants, animal life, and indeed the air.
They're going to deforest up and down the country and close ecosystems. They say they're going to build new ecosystems, but it takes 400 years, to build an ecosystem. So that's rubbish. They've already closed 1.5, Euston parks down. They're exhuming bodies of a graveyard. And the pollution, we are the fifth, one of the 5 polluted countries in the world. The pollution is going to go sky high. I'm really worried about the air pollution, and Klein Earth has taken the government to court 3 times, and the 4th time to the EU Parliament. I've gone to our house, which is part of the UN Environmental Division, and but they're not compliant. They don't mitigate.
John, Dan says you have to be realistic that the project is going to go ahead, and what your campaign is doing now is not so much trying to stop the project, but to mitigate its worst environmental effects. Is that the view of all the campaigners, or some people still hope that the government will mend its ways and realise that this project might well go off the rails?
I think we do want to raise awareness of what we're about to face in Camden. As I said earlier, we're about to become the biggest construction site in Europe, so the impacts are about to really hit us. The other thing is that, we do feel that in Camden, as in other urban areas. We're not being treated in the same way as residents in rural areas in terms of compensation. So, you know, there are people whose houses are going to be right up against the construction site. There's one house in particular I'm thinking of where the people living there are not going to be able to get into their front door. They're not going to be able to access their driveway, and yet they're not being compensated at all. So there seems to be a fundamental unfairness in the way that people in urban areas are being treated compared with those in the country.
However, sticking to the topic of compensation, there are people who've already been affected. Are they receiving the compensation that they were promised?
No, there was a Bengali couple. I went to a meeting with some lawyers, and you know, they'd been turfed out of their place at a minute's notice. And one, you know, they're in their 70s. They own their flat, and the husband is with the son on a couch, and the wife is on another couch of the daughter's house way out of London. I mean, and they haven't seen a penny. And, you know, another one, the Bree Louise, I think it's now 8 months or something like that, and they haven't seen a penny either.
That's a pub, isn't it? Yes.
Yes, it's a pub, and very, I mean, everyone used to go there. They had, you know, it was a great place, and they haven't seen a penny, and they've been ousted out. Meanwhile, the pub is, you know, it's still standing. They haven't done anything there. They could have been living there instead of spending all their savings. I mean, it's really preposterous, actually, what the government's doing.
And, you know, we're talking about the decimation of our heritage. We're talking about, as Prim says, about this exhuming of thousands of bodies from this St James's graveyard, which they still haven't got plans to relocate, by the way. And amongst of these people, there's people the likes of Sir John Soane and all these esteemed people, which I think they sort of don't really look at these things in the finer details. The plans aren't put in place, and the consultation is bogus.
But Dan, isn't the counter-argument, as a country, a project like Fast Rail, the biggest infrastructure project in the history of transport in the UK, something like that is the project of the future, and it would be impossible to build a project like that without some alteration of the physical environment somewhere.
Absolutely, and I don't think for one moment that we have to, you know, prioritise anything to do with heritage above great infrastructure projects, and particularly things to do with employment. But I'm not entirely convinced that's the case, because as John was saying, they could very, very easily move this departure point for the station. In a way, I think if you look at the scheme further down the line, there are other ways in which they're going to make more money to fund something further up. So it's a quite a devious thing in some respects. And this bigger argument to say about employment and this huge travel massive hub which they're creating isn't actually essential when you think about it. We've already got the connections into London. We don't need this thing ramroding its way right into...
Are you saying that they should have started Fast Rail in Scotland, in the north of England, where the project would have much more support?
I do think so. The connectivity into London is perfectly good. In fact, we need to get congestion out of London. We don't want to increase congestion, that's for sure. The areas are too condensed. There's much greater opportunities as a nation to develop the north more like that and have a better connection into the Midlands. And this is something that HS2, I think, has not even for one moment thought about. And why this idea of obsession with access to the south and development of the south, totally unnecessary. We don't need development in the south. It's overdeveloped. It's overdeveloped.
Exactly.
And these precious little bits of our ecology, for example, in the urban environments, is what I'm particularly interested in. And this land grab is really unacceptable. And for the greater good of our nation, is environmentally disastrous.
Is there anything that the government could do for the good people of Camden to persuade them to get behind HS2? What, if there was one thing that you would like, or a few things maybe, that they could change or consider to make it more palatable, acceptable, workable for you, what would that be?
Well, anything they can do to reduce the impact on people would obviously be incredibly welcome. I talked about compensation, but that's not the only thing we're looking for, I think. I mean, one big improvement would be if they could get more into more of the materials coming in by rail and more of the spoil, the waste going out by rail rather than by road. After all, this is a railway project. It is coming into Euston. You'd think this would be the ideal place to make maximum use of the railways. So that's one of the things we're pushing for and will continue to push for.
Primavera, if you could make one last appeal to those who are running HS2 and to the government and parliamentarians, what would that appeal be, given your personal experience?
Apart from saving the debt and scrapping the whole stupid scheme, I mean, I don't know. I think Old Oak Common is a better solution. Double deck down for the Euston Station would be less land grabbing than what they're suggesting.
But would you like these decision makers, beyond the sort of organised and staged meetings, would you like them to come down to Camden and actually physically look at what's really going on the ground?
I think they have once or twice, but it's to deaf ears. They have this thing in their head, and there's no compliancy, there's no listening. They tick the boxes, so that they can say to the R House, oh, we've done it all. But they don't communicate, and they do something, and then they ask the question rather than asking us, and then compliance, changing their design a little bit.
So, Primavera, if you had to make one final appeal to the bosses of HS2, what would that appeal be, given the experience of people in Camden?
Start the train in Scotland and bring it down. Because they need trains, they need east-west, they need, from one city in Scotland to the other. We don't need, I have 2 trains behind my house. Why are we triplicating it and running the debt from here to here? We're so much in debt. Do we need this? I mean, it's only the investors that are going to make money.
We've had a lot of public meetings and we've come together on many occasions, and there is a very strong feeling across the borough about this issue.
And good luck to you all in your campaign.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being on the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you.
Last week's show discovered a developing consensus that the present twin-track system of public infrastructure and private operators was probably past its sell-off date, and certainly not the way to run a railway. This week has illustrated a growing concern that too much of the railway's scarce resources are being invested in speed and prestige, while the emphasis should be on comfort and facilities for the travelling public. And an abiding thought that effective fast rail would also have started north to south rather than just from London upwards. The HS2 train is due to reach Manchester and Leeds in 2033 at a cost of a cool £60 billion. But by the time it pulls into these northern stations, will new forms of smart, flexible mass transportation already be signalling that this new age of the train was a passing phase, not a route to the future? So Lord Adonis was the original progenitor when he was Transport Minister in a Labour government. But doesn't that in itself indicate that this is something which has cross-party support? It sailed through the House of Commons, the hybrid bill is through. Now, even if you're correct in your doubts and your opposition, surely it's too late for the Stop HS2 campaign.
Well, the first problem is that the cross-party support for it from not everybody in each of the parties meant that it never had any real scrutiny. It was very much a case of, yeah, all right, the whip say we'll do this, so they went ahead with it. But there's plenty of time to stop it. They haven't actually started building it yet.
They've spent a lot of money.
They've spent a lot of money, but they'll spend another 50 billion on their figures to finish it. You could cancel it now and have 50 billion to spend on other projects.
It's your campaign, or the campaign you lead, is it not really looking to the past? I mean, obviously, HS2 is bound to cause some environmental change. Nothing as big as that wouldn't, but basically, surely it's the fast rail is the mode of transport of the future.
HS2 is a 19th century solution to the 21st century problems. So it even starts off in Birmingham Curzon Street, which was opened in time for the coronation of Queen Victoria. It's not a current idea. You could do so much more. You could do a lot more with broadband, Wi-Fi on trains. If you go on a train these days, you will see so many people sitting there working. They don't need faster trains. They need better infrastructure on the trains. If you weren't going to do railways, you could do more investment into things like driverless cars. There's all sorts of interesting things. If you want to do a 21st century project, you don't build a fast train. You look at the future. So there's a lot of different things that you could do if you weren't spending £50 billion on HS2.
One thing that's always puzzled me about HS2, perhaps you can answer the question, in the absence of the HS2 people themselves, why did they start in London to Birmingham? Would there not been an argument for the north of England being the first, because the distances are longer, then presumably the time of travel gets much shorter?
If you wanted to start with a high-speed train, you'd look at much more options. You wouldn't necessarily just concentrate on getting to London. You'd look at the options like, would you want to go through onto HS1? And the answer is yes, you would, except the people who are designing HS2 were based in London. They saw it as the centre of the universe. You that was where they were concentrating.
So you would argue that the best place for more rail investment perhaps would be east-west in the north of England to get across England and perhaps connecting Scotland with the north of England. These are quite large distances and long rail travel at the present moment in terms of journey time.
Yeah, those were all options that weren't looked at. It was very much a case of let's build a high-speed train from London, whereas if you go and talk to people in the north, or the sort of Manchester Leeds area, they cross Pennine links. If you want to go up to Scotland, you want better links from Scotland down to the places in the north of England, and obviously you want better transport sort of across Scotland as a whole. So HS2 is very much London-centric, south-east-centric. It's all based around getting to London, not about looking at these longer distance.
But with the hybrid bill through and the bulldozers metaphorically and physically almost moving in, how on earth can your campaign group mobilise to put a spoke in the HS2 wheel?
The first thing to remember is, of course, that HS2 was supposed to have been already under construction now, and it's being postponed and postponed. It's supposed to start in 2015. It's now looking at 2019. They're still doing ground surveys on the Phase 1 route. So they're way behind where they should have been if they were going to build it on their timescales. They haven't actually started building anything. That's the key point. They've knocked some things down. They've put in some of the groundworks, but they haven't actually got as far as building anything big. And even once they do, they're looking at 50 billion odd pounds or more. 50 billion is what the government thinks it's going to cost. So you're spending. You could stop it and say
50,000 million pounds.
50,000 million pounds.
Penny Gaines, let's just imagine, I know this is difficult, but let's say I'm Chris Grayling, in the absence of Chris Grayling, the Transport Secretary, who couldn't appear with us today. So what would you say to the Transport Secretary if he was here to listen to you just now?
Cancel HS2 straight away, work out what the real problems with transport in the country are, and then you can get on and do something new. HS2, it's a sort of 19th century solution to a 21st century problems. You need to look at what we need going forward.
HS2 is meeting a rising tide of scepticism, but it can still count on parliamentary support and from the train operators and from the trade unions. People like Steve Hedley of the RMT, who we interviewed recently. Looking at HS2, been the largest infrastructure project in the country at the present moment. What's the RMT view? Do you think this is a sensible investment, or do you have your doubts?
Well, I welcome any investment in the railway industry, but I have to say I think there's parts of the country where it would have been better used. For example, down into parts of Wales, down into the West Country, maybe the parts of Scotland. I think the services that are there now, from that corridor up through Birmingham, through the Midlands and to Manchester, I think it's a pretty decent service as it is. I think the money could have really been used better elsewhere.
Welcome back. One of the first communities to feel the impact of fast rail is Camden Town in London, site of the terminus for HS2. Alex encountered a mixture of bitterness, sadness and resolve in Coburg Street.
So Craig, it must be compensation. They must say, well, you're taking your business away, but fill in this form and you'll get the cash to tide you over.
Yeah, over the course of time we've been form filling and putting in the stuff that they need for that. But it's been moved about a few times. They've moved the goalposts.
What do you mean moved about? What does that mean?
Requesting more information when we thought we'd given them everything they've got. But our team's working meticulously to make sure when we've got it all together, we've got it right, so we don't have to do it again.
So it's not really the point that there's no compensation, it's more that is compensation delayed? Is compensation denied? Is it?
It's delayed, not denied. Yeah.
So when you got the dreaded news in, that this was it, you were getting closed down, I take it you didn't leave any of the stock behind?
Oh God, no. No. The last weekend we had a party where we drank it dry, and the only thing left wet in this place was mine and my wife's tears.
I can understand. And we're all customers, I think. One of them's here, isn't he?
He is. Bart, very good friend of the family, and was a next door neighbour for a long, long time.
How are you doing, sir? Bartley Robbins.
Yes.
You're the holdout man. You're the last man standing.
Last man standing, I'm afraid.
So your situation is that they haven't offered you rehousing, because the tenancy was in the name of your partner, who is back in Scotland, but you've been paying the rent, the council tax, everything, all these years.
Everything, 25 years.
But you're not getting any help.
As I say, they referred me to a care home a couple of weeks ago, an actual old people's care home.
They want to put you in a care home, but you want a replacement flat. You want to stay in a community.
Yeah.
It must.
And I've actually got offered the flat in my ex-partner's name.
Your ex-partner's name? But
Yeah.
of course, you want one in your name that you'll have security over. It must break your heart to see the street like this.
Certainly is. I still keep in touch with all my neighbours. We're very close. We were very, very close.
So what kind of community was Colbert Street?
Oh, unbelievable, honestly.
It's,
that pub, everybody was just, that was packed every night.
And did it remind you of being back in Scotland with that kind of close-knit community, yeah?
Even the homeless, we got in with a lot of the homeless people.
Yeah. So
tried to help them as much as we could.
It must be an extraordinary thing living in a building site. I mean, you were telling me that when yesterday, I think this whole thing was blocked up. You had to clamber over.
Clamber over the fencing. When they were drilling, must have been drilling here.
And you were in court recently trying to assert your right. And I understand you had to represent yourself, is that right?
Yes.
That must have been very difficult for you.
It was. It was.
But to put your case, but no help as yet.
No help as yet.
How about your local member of parliament, Keir Starmer? He's a good man. Have you been to see him? Are you going to go and see him to say, look, can you help?
I have received a letter from Keir Starmer, but I'm going to go and try and get a personal.
And you've got a House of Commons connection, I understand, haven't you? Tell us what it is.
I've done state opening for the Queen for the last 15 years.
Because what were you to trade? What are you to trade?
Carpet fitter.
So you fitted the carpets in the House of Commons, but
many times, and all the big issues, Obama when they come over, the Pope.
I remember these visits.
Yeah, I don't know the stages,
But all you're after now is an alternative house where you can fit your own carpets.
Exactly.
What would you say to Chris Grayling and his henchmen if Chris Grayling, the Transport Secretary, came along Colbert Street today and knocked on your door and said, how are you getting on, Mr. Robbins at number 67? What would you say to him?
Not very well at all. I'm a bag of nerves and frightened. They can come round any time.
Do you think that people, when they see these great projects, do you think they aren't able to see the human side and what happens to people?
To be quite honest, I don't really know what. Everybody in this street was given a flat. They were to choose from three flats, all the new builds up Hampstead Road. Not one person from this street was given that flat. They moved them into students' flats.
So you think the
process,
not just your own case, but the whole process for this community could have been handled much better?
Oh, by far.
Because, if it's going to be, best of £100 billion project.
Exactly.
You think that a few million could have been set aside to make sure you sustain the community?
Yeah. Plus, it's Craig, he could have been still there for months.
This is Craig Douglas, the host I've been speaking to about.
Yeah.
I suppose,
he's not just a.
He's
a friend.
Local, yeah?
Yes, it was. And it was like a neighbour, not a pub. It was that close a community.
So Bartley, we wish you well.
Thank you.
And I hope you seek the help of your member of parliament and get some justice.
I'll definitely go and try
and hopefully people will remember there's a human face to these projects.
Yes.
Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Craig, it's a pretty sad sight now. How did you become a victim of HS2?
Basically got notice last October that they needed a compulsory purchase order of the property.
So they just bought it whether you wanted to sell or not?
Absolutely, no choice in the matter.
And did you have any system of appeal? Could you make your case, say, can't I keep running the pub, at least for the time being?
Well, we tried. I was in front of the House of Commons and House of Lords Select Committees to argue for fair and proper compensation because I didn't think you could stop the juggernaut running.
Tell me a bit about the Bree Louise. I mean, I know it was an award-winning pub. I mean, how long were you and your lady wife running it? How long was it in the family? What did it mean to you?
When we bought it, it was called the Jolly Gardeners, and my wife and I sadly lost one of our twins named Bree Louise back in 2003. So we asked Camden Licensing if we could change the name of it, and fortunately they granted us that permission, and it's been the Bree Louise ever since.
So it's more than just a a business. There's a huge emotional attachment you had in these premises.
Oh, and it was our house and our home for 15 years as well.
And you won plenty of awards, I understand. Tell us about how popular it was here locally.
Yeah, we were a big real ale and cider pub. We were Real Ale Pub of the Year for our London Camera branch in 2009 and again in 16, and were Cider Pub of the Year in 2015.
And what's it like coming back and seeing it in this state?
It's soul-destroying for me, and my wife couldn't even face being here today.
What would your message be to Chris Grayling, the transport sector?
Basically, get things in on budget, I think, would be the first thing, and get those people paid fairly and as quickly as possible.
Are you saying you haven't been paid anything yet?
Not yet. We've got a claim in process there. HS2 are chasing us for information to finalise that, but it's a work in progress.
And so how are you living? How are you sustaining yourself and your family?
At the moment, we've spent our life savings, cashed a couple of pensions and borrowed some money from the bank.
And this is happening to neighbours, other businesses around here?
I believe there's a lot of people far worse off than me.
So behind this huge infrastructure project, which, as you say, overall budget may be out of control, but behind that project, there are real human stories of people who've effectively been casualties, like literally bulldozed out the way.
Oh, absolutely. And not just a few of them.
And would there be, in your opinion, any other way to do this? I mean, could there not have been a redevelopment plan? Couldn't people have been offered an alternative accommodation nearby, maybe another pub nearby? Couldn't that have been done?
I think that was their initial plans, but it just never come to fruition.
And you think it will?
No, never, no.
So the people here who've been moved will be forgotten?
I think so, yeah, probably.
And don't you think, what's about the argument? Say, well, look, OK, it's really unfortunate that the Bree Louise has been closed, these people have been moved out of their homes, other businesses have been shut down, but this is a huge national infrastructure project. I mean, you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. And what would you say to those that it's unfortunate, but look, these things have to be done? Well,
yeah, they do have to be done, but the initial plans for this, which we all saw in the front of Euston Station years ago, were fabulous plans for sociable housing, for businesses and for offices and pubs and bars and restaurants. But of course that all got scrapped, so it didn't happen at all.
And if they'd gone about it in that way, if there had been a more human side to what's happening to everyone here in Coburg Street, people here wider in Camden, would you have been satisfied with that?
No, not really, because it's just taken them so long to do everything. Now, we asked for an extended rolling short-term lease here at the Bree Louise, and that's 7 months ago, and they haven't broken ground. They've done nothing to the place as yet. So there's no
you could have
reason.
been operating in the last 7 months quite easily. I mean, we're filming here. You could have been the HS2 workers could have been having their pub lunches.
Absolutely, absolutely. We still could have been trading it, and we could have been out of here in a week, which they knew was the plan for us.
Now, actually, just say, for example, I was Chris Grayling. I know it's a leap of the imagination, but let's say I'm Chris Grayling here with my henchmen. What would your message to Chris Grayling be?
It could have been done a lot nicer.
And would this be a message that would be broadcastable, or would it be one that's expressed in stronger terms?
That's the strongest terms I'll put it for being broadcast, otherwise you wouldn't be able to broadcast it.
And what's your hopes for the future? What you and your family, and is there going to be another way to commemorate your lost daughter?
I hope so. I hope we'll be able to go again once we get our hopefully fair and proper compensation. Then another Bree Louise is in the offing.
Well, good luck to you and your family.
Thank you.
So out and about in Camden, we didn't discover much comfort for people worried about the community impact of HS2. It might be thought that in a £65 billion project there would have been room for the community investment the people of Coburg Street claimed they were promised. Of course, it's not possible to mount a full-scale transport revolution without changing the physical landscape. However, the trouble with the HS2 revolution is it might be outdated before it's built. Isambard Kingdom Brunel astonished the world by building the Great Western Railway in the 1830s. He developed the whole 150-mile revolutionary wide-gauge line from design through parliamentary bills right through Box Hill. He even built Paddington Station. He did all that in under 8 years. Even with no more slippage, HS2 first phase to Birmingham will take more than twice that time for the same distance. And even the notoriously expensive Brunel was relatively cheaper than HS2. Indeed, a secret Cabinet Office report leaked to the Sunday Times recently suggested the whole project was highly likely to go as much as 60% over budget, and the cost could balloon to more than £80 billion. One thing's for sure, even HS2 is the only show in town to fast-linked cities. It's still unlikely to last 200 years of Brunel's railway masterpiece,